Imagine a child who does not cry in a cradle, but rises smiling from the heart of a lotus. Imagine a figure who moves between worlds, a prince who becomes a renunciate, a teacher who speaks to demons and kings with the same calm voice. This is the story of Guru Rinpoche, also known as Padmasambhava, the lotus-born, a man whose life reads like a doorway between the ordinary and the sacred. We will follow his birth, his strange and fearless choices, and the teachings that planted a new spiritual tradition in the high places of Asia. According to ancient accounts, Padmasambhava was not born in the usual way but emerged fully formed from a lotus flower on a sacred lake. The name Padmasambhava literally means lotus-born, and that image, a luminous child in 1,000 petals, became the primal symbol of his life. This miraculous origin story announces from the first line that his life will blur the boundary between myth and history, a human presence permeated by a kind of sacred radiance that commands both respect and wonder. Raised in a royal court and expected to inherit power, he chose a different destiny. Rather than sit upon a throne, Padmasambhava turned toward spiritual practice, walking away from ceremonial life toward austerity and meditation. This was not a private retreat. It was a deliberate and dramatic renunciation that unsettled those who wished to keep him close to worldly prestige. By abandoning the crown, he announced that spiritual authority, not political title, would define his mission. Alone at the edge of the known world, he practiced in the cremation grounds and the wild places, training with dakinis and learning methods that would later astonish kings and scholars. These early disciplines were intense, practices meant to transmute fear, to transform anger and desire into vehicles of insight. In those forbidding places, Padmasambhava learned the inner arts that allow a practitioner to meet the raw forces of mind without being overwhelmed, and to turn those forces into compassion for others. Love and power followed his path in strange forms. He met Mandarava, a princess who became both companion and fellow practitioner, and together they faced persecution for refusing the easy compromises of court life. Cast into a funeral pyre, their bodies did not burn. The flames cooled, and a lotus carried them above the smoke. Whether told as miracle or deep metaphor, this episode shows a central theme of his life: the refusal of easy violence, the transformation of danger into a vehicle for awakening, and the force of an unshakable inner conviction. Word of his attainments traveled across mountain passes and caravan routes until it reached a land where Buddhism was only beginning to take root. The rulers who sought a new spiritual foundation invited him westward. He accepted not as a conqueror, but as a teacher who knew how to meet the specific needs of a new place. His coming to Tibet was not a casual visit. It was a turning point in which local traditions and Buddhist ideas would learn to speak to one another through skillful means. Arriving in a land of towering peaks and volatile climate, he did what scholars and texts alone could not. he addressed the local spirits and deities, not by denouncing them, but by transforming them into protectors of the Dharma. Through ritual, oath, and demonstration of inner power, the volatile entities that once obstructed the building of monasteries were persuaded to safeguard the teachings instead. This pragmatic, theatrical, and profoundly intelligent approach allowed Buddhism to move from fragile experiment to a social and spiritual force embedded in the land. At the heart of his work were two intertwined projects: establishing institutions and transmitting practices. He helped inaugurate the first major monastery in the region and worked with translators and scholars to render complex teachings into the local language. But he also taught tantric cycles, intimate, demanding methods meant to accelerate realization for those prepared to undertake them. In this balance of infrastructure and intimate training, Padmasambhava shaped a living lineage rather than a static doctrine. Wary of decline and persecution, he employed a radical tactic, Padmasambhava, concealed teachings, known as terma or treasure texts, in rocks, lakes, and remote hermitages to be revealed by later adepts at the time they would best serve beings. This long game of spiritual preservation turned the landscape into a living archive and created a sense that revelation could occur anew in every era. The idea of hidden treasures kept practices adaptable, mysterious, and perpetually alive across generations. Across the centuries, his story has worn many robes. Some see him as a historical siddha, others as an archetypal figure whose life teaches a way of engaging suffering and power. What persists is the pattern: a teacher who meets crisis with creativity, who uses both ritual and reason, and who refuses to let the past fossilize the living movement of awakening. His life invites us to consider how ideas travel, survive, and become embedded in culture, and how one committed person can change the spiritual landscape of an entire region.